I can see this girl's dreams. Oceans, oceans. Oceans, oceans. Oceans as far as the eye can see. They are vast seas, none can swim across them, they yield no fish to catch. What did the king of Hyrule say? That the gods sealed Hyrule away? And they left behind people who would one day awaken Hyrule? How ridiculous. So many pathetic creatures scattered across a handful of islands, drifting on the sea like fallen leaves in a forgotten pool. What can they possibly hope to achieve? Don't you see? All of you. Your gods destroyed you. Hello everyone, and welcome to Goron Brothers, where we talk about all things Zelda, and some other stuff too. I'm your host, Kogaru. Today we're doing a theory on one of my absolute favorite games in the Zelda franchise, The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker. One of the reasons it's one of my favorite games in the franchise is because there is so much to go into in it. There's a lot of lore, there's a lot of things to learn, there's just so much to explore all across the Great Sea. That leads me into what we're talking about today, the Great Sea, and what exactly it is. So just kick back, listen up, and we're going to talk about it. Once long ago, this land of Hyrule was turned into a world of shadows by Ganon, who sought to obtain the power of the gods for his own evil ends. My power alone could not stop the fiend, and our only choice was to leave the fate of the kingdom in the hands of the gods. When the gods heard our pleas, they chose to seal away not only Ganon but Hyrule itself, and so, with a torrential downpour of rains from the heavens, our fair kingdom was soon buried beneath the waves, forgotten at the bottom of the ocean. Now I find what the King of Hyrule has to say about that very interesting. He mentions it was buried beneath the waves, forgotten at the bottom of the ocean, but it doesn't look anything like the bottom of the ocean when you get right down there. Now on the screen I have playing this real-world example of, what the bottom of an ocean looks like. You've got a coral reef, you've got fish, you've got life, you've got stuff going on here. It's not just a barren, empty void of space. But this is Zelda we're talking about. We don't always need to go into real-world examples to discuss what we're talking about. So instead of just using real-world examples of what the ocean should look like, I've gone back and looked at a few different examples of Zelda games and what the bottoms of their seas and their oceans have looked like. If you look at this example in Majora's Mask, you see the Zora swimming through, there's life, there's a like over there, there's sand everywhere, there's fish, although to be fair, the fish are undead, so not exactly your best example of that, but you also have reefs, kelp, other things like that going on down here. So that's our example of Majora's Mask under the ocean. And that's not the only time we've spent time underwater in the Zelda series. No, we have examples in Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess. So look at this clip from Twilight Princess and just look at what it's like underwater. In this clip we have Zora swimming around, there's a bit of plant life underneath, there's rocks to blow up, there's just a lot more going on here. So with all of this, what exactly am I getting at? What I'm getting at is that the sea in Wind Waker is an illusion, an ethereal sea. Simply put, it's not real. I first heard this theory from a friend of mine a couple of years back, and at the time, I called him crazy. I said, there's no way the sea is fake. I mean, Link can swim in it, he can drown in it, there's monsters in it, there's a fish in it, there's all this. But we were talking about it recently, so I just decided to give it a little bit more thought and do some due diligence on my research on it. And I've kind of come to agree with him. So first things first, let's look at the evidence. So in this clip here, this is the only time we really see what it's like underwater in all of the Wind Waker. Nothing too special about it, except it's completely empty. You can't see any monsters, there's no fish, and the light of the sun never fades the further they go down. And we don't start to lose any color at all until we get to the frozen Hyrule Castle. And here at the bottom of the ocean, there's no anything. There's no sand, there's no coral reefs, there's nothing for fish to live in. It's all completely untouched, as the gods intended to leave it. Now you might say, oh, that's only the bottom of the ocean. That's only the area around Hyrule that's like this. But honestly, all of the Wind Waker's map is above Hyrule. Ganon's tower is right below the Forsaken Fortress. The Hero of Time hid his Triforce shards all across the land. So the entire bottom of the Great Sea, as we can explore it, is Hyrule. Not only is the bottom of Hyrule not a fit habitat for any fish or sea life, but the people above the waves themselves even comment that there's no fish. At the beginning of this video, you had my first example of Ganondorf, mentioning that there are no fish in this whole sea. But here we have another example with the Salvage Corporation. Mighty fine boat you got there, bub. You must be searching for treasure on the seafloor too, aren't you? Har har har, you won't get any from us, bub. Not likely. Let me ask you something real quick. Who wanders around on a fishless sea? I'll tell you who, bub. Only pirates, monsters, and treasure hunters like ourselves, and maybe some other things that I've never heard of. One more thing I'd like to mention is the fishmen. They're a bit of an oddity in this entire argument because they don't really function like a normal fish does. They don't even function like the Zora once did. They pretty much only eat bait, they interact with other Hylians above the waves, and they can take an arrow to the neck and walk it off, basically. It actually helps them. So I'm not sure if I would consider them normal fish or monsters. So I'm not sure where to put them, to be completely honest. But they do refer to the King of Red Lions as someone who did help them in the past. So I suspect there's some, goddess-fueled tomfoolery going around when it comes to the fishmen. Now, isn't it a bit odd that in Wind Waker, the game with the absolute most amount of water, it's one of the only ones in the entire Legend of Zelda franchise that does not have a fishing minigame? We even have evidence, direct evidence, that there is at least one fish species that evolved to get out of this water. Anyone who knows the Wind Waker lore is probably familiar with the fact that the Rito evolved from the Zora in the course of only a couple hundred years. Aegionoma himself said, "We created the Rito as the evolved form of the Zora that appeared in Ocarina of Time, and the Koroks as what the Kokiri became once they left the forest. They appear different, but they have inherited their blood." Now, it's often been said, if the entire world is covered in water, why would the Zora, who live in the water, evolve to the Rito? I mean, to put it simply, they could probably still swim in it like Link does, but there's nothing in there. There's no fish, there's nothing to eat, there's a couple of monsters, and I'm sure they taste bad, because they are fueled by Ganondorf's own power. But fish are one of the primary diets of the Zora. If they're not there, what is the point in them even staying in the water? So I guess their logical conclusion was to take the land, collect scales from the dragon Valu, and learn how to fly. Of course, there are other creatures living in the Great Sea. You have the Big Octo, the Gaiorgs, the Octoroks, and the Sea Hats. The only one of these that are called fish in any sort of capacity are the Sea Hats, but they are fueled by Ganondorf's power, as when you kill them, they do poof into that smoke that Ganondorf's minions often do. So we've established that the bottom of the ocean doesn't look anything like an ocean. There's no fish at all in the sea. The Zoras even left it behind. That all starts to give credence to that idea that it is an ethereal sea and not a true sea. And one of the last things I want to point out is that the entire structure and environment of Hyrule completely changed. There were mountains created where there weren't mountains before. In the original Ocarina of Time, the only real mountain is Death Mountain. Everything else is on pretty level ground. The gods themselves changed the shape of the land so that the people could survive above this ethereal sea. So you might be able to swim in it, it might make you wet, and it might have monsters. That's all there is to say about the Great Sea of the Wind Waker. And here at the end of the game, that's when the ethereal sea truly becomes an ocean. When the King of Hyrule makes his final wish on the Triforce, he creates a true ocean. It floods all that remains of Hyrule, and it allows Link and Zelda to take on new adventures in foreign oceans where they have never been before. Who knows? In the years following Wind Waker, maybe fish did start to show up in that sea now that the gods were done with the old Hyrule. And that's it for our video today. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way to this point, please leave a like and comment and subscribe to our channel if you want more Zelda content like this. And take a look at some of our other videos because we are starting to post more and more of them.